Doctor, the stage is now yours.
Thank you so much. Welcome to this very, very exciting panel. My name is Melati. So as a background, professionally, I'm a labor economist at Asia School of Business, and measuring is something that I love very much. But I know for a lot of the CSOs and NGOs in the room, measuring impact may actually be something that you hate because people keep on telling you you have to do it. But it can take a lot of resources and it can take a lot of effort from your organization, especially grassroots ones, to actually do it quite well, right? So we're going to explore basically today a lot of different aspects surrounding impact measurement, specifically, how to do it well. Aditi perhaps will talk a little bit about what can be done better, what are some kind of best practices that happen around the world. And we will also hear from Izzah a little bit about the Malaysian landscape and kind of how that works right here. So in order to start, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our speakers very quickly. So we have my first speaker right here, Nurul Izzah. I don't think she needs much introduction, but I'll go ahead and give her some. So she's the executive chairperson of Polity, a think tank dedicated to social justice, inclusive economic growth, and evidence-based reform. She's also strategic advisor to the Selangor Information Technology and Digital Economy Corporation, and advisor to Malaysian Humanitarian Aid and Relief. A three-term member of parliament for Pematang Pao and co-founder of the People's Justice Party in 1999. She has been a very prominent voice for democratic reform and human rights, tabling multiple private members' bills on civil liberties and socioeconomic issues. So welcome, Izzah, and I hope that you'll speak a little bit later about some of the work that you've done. And then from Jakarta, we have Lina Marliani, who is the executive director of JPAL. So Lina is the ED now, based at the University of Indonesia's Institute for Economic and Social Research. She leads organizations' efforts to improve social program effectiveness in Indonesia and the region through evidence-based policymaking, overseeing research, policy outreach, and capacity building. And before JPAL, she has experience working at the World Bank on poverty reduction and community empowerment programs. So welcome, Lina, as well. And last but not least, we have Aditi Malhotra, who is the Chief Impact Officer here at Yayasan Hasanah. So Aditi leads the social impact practice, driving measurement and knowledge capabilities for the foundation and its partners. She has experience spanning multiple countries, which includes India, Australia, and various countries in Southeast Asia. And she brings a strong grasp of grassroots development needs to her work. Aditi also was previously with UNDP. So we have a very distinguished panel on here, and I would like to kind of start at the higher level, and then we'll sort of work down to specific regional or sort of context issues. And I would like to also recommend to you that you use the Slido, wherever it is, to submit your questions, because I will be taking them as the panel goes by. So maybe to Lina, very quickly. So I'm familiar with JPAL's work. I used to work at MIT before I came back to Malaysia. But maybe you can give a sense to the audience, what is JPAL and what do you all do?
Thank you. Selamat siang. Thank you for having me here today, and congratulations to the Yayasan Hasanah for the 10 years anniversary. So in Indonesia, we say that tidak kenal maka tidak sayang. So then I would like to introduce the organization about JPAL. So JPAL is actually a research network based in MIT. We have 7 regional offices, one of it in the Southeast Asia. So we are under the university. For our global office is based in MIT, but then for the Southeast Asia, we are based in Indonesia, Jakarta, under University of Indonesia. So we work our mission is actually using evidence for policy making. So we do this one by doing a research using a randomized evaluation, and then also sometimes for the academics, their incentive is actually to publish in the journal publication. But then for the office, our mission is actually translating the evidence into policy. So then we work a lot together with the government and then also with the CSO donors to actually try to evaluate what is the innovative program that can be proven. And then based on our experience working with the government, we can see that when the government actually doing the program that proven effective and cost effective, that can actually reach out to many lives. And then other than, so our methodology called randomized evaluation, this is like when, if you are familiar, it's from the medical scientists. For example, like during COVID, when we want to introduce a vaccine, then you want to see whether the vaccine is actually working or not working, then you use like randomized evaluation. You have like a set of patients that you will do like treatment and control, and then you will see whether that there is the effectiveness of the vaccine. And we did this one through the social science. But then, please note, randomized evaluation is not for everything. I would like to say that using randomized evaluation when it's actually appropriate, also like it's part of your broader goal, or is actually answer like specific question that you would like to see. And then we also like having like working together a lot with the government, and then this is what we call embedded lab. So for example, like we have like embedded lab we have like Egypt Impact Lab, and then we are working together with the government of Egypt across ministry to actually helping the government to find solution and innovative ideas, so then they can actually help to see like which program that works and not working. This like introduction. Thank you.
Thank you, Lina. So just to summarize, basically, so JPAL is a network of organizations, and they're primarily do basically randomized controlled trials. So I want to promote a free course online, actually, that you can take called, I think, Measuring Social Programs or something like that.
Yes.
What's it called?
Yes. So then it's called like DEDP, so development of like, I'm also like, but then it's like evaluating the social science.
Yeah.
It's an online course.
Free.
Free.
Yep.
Then so then you can actually know like when you want to do like the randomized evaluation, when you should do the randomized and when not to do the randomized.
Good. And I would like to sort of give a bit more context. So in this kind of research, typically the gold standard is going to be randomized controlled trials. So that's sort of how Abhijit Banerjee and Esther Duflo got their Nobel Prizes, because of this methodology and the use in social sciences. But also we will talk a little bit later about if you can't do RCTs, if you can't measure specifically, how else can you prove that your organization is creating impact, right? And now I would like to move a little bit to Izzah. So we've heard a little bit about what JPAL does. Tell me, in Malaysia, in your experience, what kind of pilots or anything that you've done in Malaysia that relate to using data for policy making.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam hormat. Thank you very much, Melati. It's really wonderful to hear about this randomized evaluation, because it places a benchmark, Lina, in terms of not just what we expect of CSOs, but what governments should kind of aspire towards. And I wanted to share this 3 concentric circles that was first developed by Mark Moore, because it kind of frames the way I look at the impact, efficacy, and success of any pilots. It basically talks about the first circle, it has to be technically correct. And the other one is politically supportable. The Melissa mentioned politics many times just now. And the third, because we're always dealing with civil servants or bureaucracy, it has to be organizationally implementable. Because if the organization is resistant, then no matter how great and innovative and superb these evidence-based ideas are, it will not be sustainable. So then from these 3 concentric circles, you have to hit the sweet spot. Which types of measurement that will be applicable to the politics, where it's politically feasible, therefore the politicians want it, therefore the cabinet will approve, and I hope you don't mind me being frank. Number 2, that the CSOs understand that it's meaningful work on the ground. If you're not touching lives, but it's also all about perception, that's also wrong. And number 3, that the civil servants are empowered, are also encouraged enough to make sure it is part and parcel of their KPI. So that measurement, I think, not going as far back as the gold standard of randomized evaluation, but it must be done correctly. And if I can touch quickly on the 3 pilots, which I think I'm building on the work and the strength of CSOs and others. The first, we approached a poverty expert, Professor Fatimah Kari, which you also met. And we had to do a pilot separate from the existing agencies of government because it was at the height of COVID. We wanted to make sure we measure what the average lowest income household had to undergo from the perspective or lens of a multidimensional poverty index. So you can add on, you had new dimensions. How small were your household? Was your household? How comfortable, how easy it was for your kids to access internet. So you can put in a multidimensional, you know more about this, but we did it at the height of COVID. So of course it's difficult to get access, to get enumerators. So we really had to rely on a handful of students, and it was like a kamikaze-ish. Of course, we adhered to the SOPs. You know this. But by the same token, we got a minister in the Prime Minister's department to be our air cover. I was from the opposition then, so Datuk Sri Mustafa Mohammed was my air cover because we want to make sure it basically addresses the issue, the people, not the politics. So if you have a bipartisan support for a multidimensional poverty index study that addresses how COVID hit the lowest income household, then you get an outcome you can sort of implement or adopt or absorb in the government agency. So I think ICU, Implementation Coordination Unit, of course, looked further into MPI. Now the second pilot, because by now I realized Yayasan Hasanah had sponsored and supported 94 trust schools. These brilliant schools, thanks to the work of SCSOs, it was a LEAP ad, and of course Teach for Malaysia, you know who you are, but only 94. There's 10,000 schools in Malaysia. And these schools won the Best School Award 3 years running. I mean, different schools, of course, but the point is, when the idea came from Yayasan Hasanah, as well as Tan Sri Idris Juso, I used to fight with him back in the day, but for education we unite, then we realized, how do you make sure it is escalated, it is increased? And thanks to the work of so many people, some of them are here, I would mention Encik Khalid from Pantau Madani, that 94 school expanded to 3,458, about 83,000 students affected. Of course, it's not, again, measuring. There's always that black dot, right, in that huge white canvas. Which measurement are you using? It's not the same as what exactly was done in the 94 schools, but at least you had more CSO immersion in government school ecosystem. And the third is the pilot I kind of pushed when we realized Bernas had this innovative, smart, berskala besar tanaman sawah padi fields. They are trying to improve the yield. And basically, I told them, well, how is it developing? So we kind of added the extra push to see what is actually happening on the ground. Because this is a bit different, right? Because the agencies were already adopting it. There's a really technically sound idea. And the civil servants will, of course, say yes, because Bernas is a big boy in paddy farming. And lo and behold, we saw 1.41 metric tons extra per hectare for all the farmers that participated in the program. And right now, at least it's easier to scale up. But in all three, there's 3 different concentric circles help as a guide. Because if you think you got the best idea in the world, it's not going to move if you don't tweak and poke the politicians and you don't move the bureaucracy.
Thank you, Izzah. So I think the interesting part of hearing what Izzah said is I think the framework was very useful. So it was civil service capability, political, and then the third one was?
So I'll repeat again because I might make it too political than it should be.
You all should take notes now and draw your circles.
Technically correct.
Yeah.
politically supportable, right? And organizationally implementable. Yeah.
Thank you. And so I think one thing that the reason why I sort of started following your work was actually because of this multidimensional poverty index, which I think is a fantastic thing for, a politician to take up and to actually understand more. One of my concerns, actually, as a researcher here, is that there is not enough support for measurement of impact. And I don't only mean numbers, I mean like collection of stories, systematic monitoring of indicators from all of the different aspects. And I see Izzah's effort and Prof. Fatima's work, a lot of this and this, supports this ecosystem, right? And it makes what we're talking about more meaningful, because the more people believe in measuring impact, however you do it, the better we are, I think, as a society. And so I would like to now take Aditi. So the third kind of piece here from the circles that Izzah was talking about is actually capability, in a sense, right? Like the ability of organization to measure. She was talking about civil service. Tell me a little bit about your experience working with grassroots in measuring impact, and how, what challenges have been faced, what kind of good stories have you heard? Tell me a little bit about sort of at the more micro level.
Thanks, Melati. So I think you did touch upon when you mentioned the fact that we are obsessed with numbers. Before I go into understanding what impact, I just want to kind of dial back into how do we misunderstand what are the myths around impact measurement. So impact measurement is not a scoreboard. It's not a checklist. The real value in impact measurement is to understand the game better. Learning is key. And when we started on this journey 10 years back, we also started with giving our partners log frames and documents, and we soon realized what really is the value. In the work of social development, it's very complex, but we expect results to be delivered overnight, and funders are to be blamed as much, right? We want results overnight. We are not patient with being able to work with communities, giving social organizations the capacity, the information to be able to deliver on ground. And that's where Hasanah kind of paused and reflected. And we did this exercise not just sitting in the office, I must say that, because we engaged our partners, we engaged communities, we engaged the board, we engaged our stakeholders to say, tell us, what do you think, what do you understand by when you understand impact? Because impact is so variously understood. If you meet a person, you've impacted their lives, but have you? So do we pause enough to say, actually, what is the why? Why did I get into this social intervention? And therefore, I should know how to measure it before I know why I'm doing it. So those questions are core to when we started thinking and reflecting a little bit more deeply. And then we kind of realized, yes, capacity is important, but it's also important to drive the idea of a certain values-based framework. So what we internally postulated was called the MPACT framework, which it's a big acronym. Malaysians love acronym. I'm a part of the game. So,
we do.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll break the acronym down for you. So it's empowerment, partnership, accountability, and trust. And these values are important because you need to give, as Helen was saying in the morning, there needs to be a human face. There needs to be a human kind of voice into impact measurement. Numbers are dense, numbers are misunderstood, and numbers are also daunting. But actually, the point really about impact measurement is to be able to bring forth the stories, bring forward the people, bring forward the communities, work with them, engage with them, and also bring forth the uncomfortable truths. And that's really, and so what you really do with impact measurement is to show a mirror. You don't say what's the right thing and the wrong thing, and if we don't help our foundations understand that, then as a funder we failed. And if as a funder we don't help governments understand that, we fail them as well. Because our real role is to be able to develop proof of concept. And as Izzah was saying, we bring that concept to governments and tell them, hey, there's potential in this. Help us scale up, because we are not government. We cannot scale at the national level. So you do what you're doing at best, but at the same time, building organizational capacities to understand why a project is important, do a needs assessment, tell them why a baseline needs assessment is important, and therefore then bring in a certain kind of measurement perspective in. Not that we don't work with indicators, we do work with KPIs and indicators, but KPIs are indicative. They are indicative. They are not the holy grail. Because often when we ask partners to report and we expect them the results to start and stop with KPIs. People trained is, okay, you've trained people, we gave you a fund for it. What happened after that? You've been able to bring a certain learning recovery program to the school, very good. The intervention is going where it needs to be done. What are we learning from it? And therefore, how are we learning that, bringing that learning pool? So learning measurement is not linear. It's a loop, which we often forget. We don't take the measurement back into learning. Both things stop there. Therefore, you don't design effective programs. You don't design effective programs at the grassroots level. You don't fund those because you don't see them, you don't fund them. And because you don't fund them, you cannot scale them. So therefore, I think a little bit of a thinking around why and what is the importance of impact and why is it crucial to think about it throughout the journey of any social development program, of any intervention is key. And that's why we thought, I mean, I wouldn't say we've got all the answers, but I would say there is a certain intention to learn. There is a certain intentionality to how we are looking at impact. And I think that's really key, to be able to break that down into a thinking kind of a space versus a doing space. If you don't pause, you don't learn. But of course, the luxury of learning is also important. You need to be able to understand how are you able to putting that into your programs and how you're giving even your partners the space to fail. If you don't fail, you don't learn from it. We often, and I agree with Puan to say, even when our partners, I do understand and I do feel that they would think that if they report to us a challenge, we would either rescind funding or we would say, oh, there's something wrong, you didn't think about it, you didn't. Of course you didn't. You're working with people and community.
Yeah, if you did, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Absolutely. And I think that's key. That's key. So we bring that sense of patience into learning, and that's where I think the real value of impact measurement lies.
Thank you, Aditi. I just wanted to touch on two things. So the first thing Aditi was mentioning on willingness and ability to fail, right? Like I always tell my students when they come and grovel to me to increase their grade by 0.5%, I tell them, you know, like failure in learning is sort of part of life, right? And I feel like, I'm not sure it's a Malaysian thing, I think it might be an Asian thing, honestly, and we tend to not like to talk about our failures. But to me, I think it's a very important thing, especially in this field, because from a broader perspective, you want to know what works and what doesn't work, right? Just because, for example, an organization has a 0 reported impact doesn't mean that what they're doing is wrong, right? Maybe there's something else they should be doing. Maybe there's something they weren't measuring specifically that kind of hit the indicators. So I just wanted to highlight that for people in the room, that I think we need to be a bit more open to experimentation. I think private sector companies are very good with experimentation, essentially, and pivoting when they need to, right? I think for our sphere, we need to be a bit more agile with regards to that. But I want to kind of go back and ask Izzah and Lina now about something that Aditi mentioned, which I got a bunch of questions on, which was about this sort of value of building a very good narrative surrounding your programs, right? Building storytelling and measuring basically how the impact is. So maybe Lina first. How have you seen storytelling or kind of creating a good narrative around your impact useful in your own work, maybe Indonesia or other places?
Thank you. It's a very good question. I think before we start an evaluation, sometimes we have a hypothesis, right? What is the storytelling that we want to tell? For example, the government of Indonesia, they would like to see in Indonesia there is a program for rice for the poor. This is the government would like to see. But then in the field, then Indonesians are all so nice. This is rice only for the poor, but then they give it for everyone in the village, right? The story is the poor say that, oh, okay, maybe I should actually give it to the non-poor. I just feel bad that if I'm give it to myself, right? But then it's actually not improving. We would like to actually eliminate the poverty. So this is kind of thing, but you need to listen from the communities. The communities, they say that, oh, we want to share, but then the non-poor actually doesn't also share to the poor. And there is the information difference on this kind of thing. So one thing that they say that, oh, is it possible that we would like to give actually the benefit directly to the poor, right? And then they say that maybe should we do it rather than the rice, maybe then should we do it through the cash transfer? This is kind of cash transfer. And then, so then the government said that, oh, this is a very big movement, right? To change, like from the rise of the poor for the past 30 years, like we done this program and suddenly you want to change it to cash, right? It's not an easy change, right? And then they say that whether that actually JPAL can help to see like which one is actually more improving in the targeting system. And then so we did the evaluation. This is like, and then we can see like several areas still get the rise for the poor, and some area is actually district get the cash directly to the poor. And we can see by giving directly to the cash to the poor is actually improving the targeting and improving like decrease the poverty line in Indonesia. And then so we can tell like, so the story that we tell is actually like in kind is important, but then directly giving cash is also like better targeting. But then there's another story. If you actually giving cash to the poor people, maybe they will not buy it like for nutrition. Maybe they will buy it like to buy like for smoke or like to buy like for unnecessarily like items. And then so then this is kind giving up like another questions, right? And then so you can test out, and then we did a study about this one. Actually, from several cash transfer study that we done around the world, there is no proven evidence that the poor household is actually using the money for the non-beneficial. It's actually giving the money to the mother is proven effective. So then there's like kind of story, but then this kind of story is like coming like from the community, right? You heard like from the community like, oh, it's better to give it to the mother rather than to the father, but then we want to say whether that is actually evidence proven or not, so then we test it out, this kind of thing. And then, so then that's the voices like from the communities, and then, but then as Aditi said that, we also need to work together with the government, right? Because the one who's actually can scale up is actually the government. And then we inform the government about the result of the study and then tell them like why it's actually impactful and why it's not impactful. The other component that I want to add is actually when the program is actually not working, right?
Yes, I want to hear more about failure. Tell me.
Yes, about the failure. Failure is actually not failure. We learn from failure. Because like, when you actually program working, you scale up, or there is a success, everybody applauds, right? But then, if the program is not effective, you should actually stop it. And when it stop it, it's also a success, but no one knows. So in Indonesia, we've done this program, a very like big program about like community cash transfer. There is like cash transfer to the household and cash transfer to the community. To the community one is actually not proven effective. And then so this is like heartbroken, right? For the government, this is like my dear program, my child, and then you say to me it's not working. Like,
Don't insult my baby. You know?
yes,
Yeah.
please don't, like, why, how dare you? And then so then, but then I think like if you actually tell the story, it's not actually not working. Because like sometimes you want to see why is actually the program is not working. You want to see like why. And this one is actually not a quantitative. You need to actually go to the field, do the in-depth interview, focus group discussion, why this actually not working. So I think like quantitative methods need to be actually combined with the qualitative to get actually understand on this kind of thing. And it's not an easy, but then finally like the government understand about this kind of thing, and then they stop the program. This is like one example. We actually have several examples like where's the program failed, but we never really tell because like, yeah, it's part of the story that we want to tell. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lina. Now to Izzah, tell me a little bit. So we heard about storytelling persuasion, right? Persuading people to kind of buy into a social program. Tell me your thoughts.
I mean, it's like the magic word, like persuasion, because it's also persuading yourself to be patient. And I remember, because you hear about this increase, you're talking about 1.61, I actually missed the number, 1.61 metric tons per hectare. and you assume that every farmer would enjoy and would definitely adopt because you're getting 3,220 ringgit per hectare. And it's just simple things like following a particular deadline, making sure you utilize the items that's been given, but only 18% in one of the areas in Permatang Pasir that actually adopted it as far back as last month. So again, I think, of course, we want to also make sure we persuade, show the farmers the numbers, make sure that they themselves feel comfortable to be part of this process. But I think the stories matter, right? And the stories should be coming from the participants themselves. So even that 18%, it's important for them to feel celebrated as stakeholders and also championed. Like the pictures and the success shouldn't be on Bernas. It should be on this participants that I've agreed to this, I've done this, I've followed the regime, and here are my results. So I think every single moment, tweaking and understanding how relevant is your pitch, how relevant is your advertisement, and how relevant is your representation. Because we, of course, have many stakeholders. But the more I see it, because I tried to do it with some of the cow herders during the pandemic, not very successful, right? Because you're a city girl, what the hell do you know about, rearing cows? So I think so that really humbled me a lot, because you kind of understand at the end of the day, first, get the right agency that they trust, because trust goes a long way. And of course, they've been there, they've been at it for decades. So it's important for us to, I think the whole theme, you start by listening. Right, that's one. Number two, I think I love that Melati is celebrating failures, in a sense, because the word post-mortem, I was forced by Dr. Amjad Rabi to read this book on macroeconomics. And the post-mortem actually came from a few bridges that collapsed in the US. And then basically the government agencies were forced to have this system where you plan, and of course you ensure that it's built accordingly. Then you do a post-mortem to see the stability and so on and so forth. So I think it's also important for all running programs. It's easier said than done, and that's why I mentioned the 3 concentric circles, because for the trust schools, clearly the curriculum was great, but the hard pressing question that we have to ask, why is it so difficult to be adopted wholesale by the schools themselves? Right? As in by all the schools themselves. And I ask this because I'm also at that point, right? Because, of course you understand sensitivity, challenges, but if it ain't broken, why fix it? And now that's also another challenging, prevailing mentality. So if you talk about a program that's been run from 2015, because I hear this from some frustrated stakeholders, we run it for so long. Yes, you've expanded to 3,000 plus, 83,000 students, but what kind of stories can we use to convince the main stakeholder that you got to change the way things are being done? Because everyone feels kind of connected to education. I mean, we talk about this every single time in terms of Malaysia standards. How do you want to achieve more? How do you want to be at par with the best kind of systems worldwide? So I think, maybe we still have to figure out very clearly how do we utilize better persuasion or persuasive skills and better ways to tell these stories. Because at the end of the day, if you're able to convince more Malaysians that these programs work, then maybe it's a nicer way to kind of convince to do the final act of adoption, no longer small-scale interventions.
Thank you so much, Izzah. I love your what you bring to the panel, because you really give us the hard truths, which I love. So, yes.
So I wanted to just address, so there's a lot of interest in the course that I mentioned before, so I just Googled it. If you Google MITx Evaluating Social Programs on JPAL, so Evaluating Social Programs, you'll be able to see it's a free, I'll PM to P later what the link is. But I would really highly recommend it because again, it talks about what Lina said, when to do RCTs, when to not, what else can you do if you're not doing RCTs, stuff like that. Now, I would like to go back to Aditi, actually, because there's a number of questions for you specifically on the framework. So many people are asking if they wanted to learn more about this impact framework and sort of how Hasanah views value-based kind of programs, what resources are there for them and how can they learn more in order to kind of tailor their programs a bit more to perhaps what the funder needs?
Right. Thanks, Melati. So, very good question. And that's really how we also thought about when we developed the impact framework. Of course, there's a handbook, it's on our website. I invite everybody to listen, but we didn't stop there. What I did with my team, my fabulous team, we put together something called the Hasanah Academy. So what we did is we converted the impact framework and the M&E tools into an e-learning course. So we developed the entire platform, and it's free for every Hasanah partner. We encourage everybody to learn. So it's largely, unfortunately, only for Malaysian organizations and those that are funded by Hasanah because our resources are also limited. But anybody who wants to learn, who is in the space, in the sector, I invite them to engage and learn. But I think that's kind of something that I wanted to touch on, what you mentioned. Building capacities and understanding impact measurement is actually a skill set that we need to invest in, is very key. I cannot tell you how many partners and CSOs that we get who do not have the resources, the people, the staff.
Or time, right?
Or time, absolutely. Or time. So they do not have the resources. It's often seen as just data collection. You're counting the number of people. So either an intern is doing it, or you have program staff who already are they're so much swamped. They have to look at implementation, be at the field, report to a donor. They're also doing an impact measurement. So we are not looking at it and building evaluative capabilities within the sector. We're not looking at it as a leadership competency, and therefore we're not resourcing and staffing. We want CAs, but where our courses, you have one online course on M&E, tell me how many social work and how many development schools really have this as a program. So I think it's important to be able to dial back to say, what is it that we need to know? Because you're delivering social change at scale, but how are you able to understand whether what you're doing is right, whether what you're measuring, is it easy or is it what matters? Are we measuring what's easy or are we really measuring what matters? Because if you're measuring what matters, it requires you to engage with communities. It requires you to be able to invest time, resources. Issues, problems have taken decades, marginalizations, poverty, inequality. We give them 1 year, 2 year fundings. Wow, I mean, and that's something as a funder also we've realized and we've really reflected on it to say, we should go 3 years, maybe even over a period of time, do multiple cycles of funding, which we're doing. And that's taken us so many different cycles to be able to see the results. The example our chairman shared in the morning, that's taken four cycles of funding. So we need to be patient. We need to really understand and go with the communities where they are and support them. And in the language, I'm also a firm believer in the language of communicating impact, in the language in which we tell stories. It's not about us. It's not about the fund. The resources, the funding are just an enabler. The real work is actually being done by them who are there. We go in and then we feel that, oh, it's courtesy of funding, they've changed it. So that's another thing in Hasanah that we've reflected upon. We look at it from a contribution versus an attribution framework. We are contributing to that, but we're not attributing it wholly to us. Nobody can, no social welfare program can attribute it wholly to itself, be it government, be it us. And I think that's kind of also brings in a sense of humility, brings in the sense of patience, brings in a sense of partnership. Because government cannot do it alone, we all have to do it together. Foundations may have the resources, but what good are the resources if you don't have good partners, if you're not investing in resources, if you're not building in capability building? So I think those elements are also very important in the way we're understanding capacities, in the way we're working with them with the time. I think just the last thing that I wanted to kind of touch on what Puan is saying. The other thing in the sector that I've been thinking about is the fact that, you know, we look at it very simplistically in the sense that for us, scale is equal to success. But actually, not everything needs to be scaled. Not everything needs to be scaled in the
I think this is sort of like an issue of capitalism, right?
That's true. That's
like
true.
More growth,
Go
profit,
big, go big, go
Yeah,
big or
yeah.
go home, right? But actually, you know, scale.
You should go small and go home. No, I'm kidding.
Yes, and that's the framework that I've been thinking about. So, you know, scholars are saying that scale can be looked at in from 3 paradigms. You can scale up, you can look at policy, you can look at influencing governance, you can scale out, you can look at, like you said, trust school program, what can we do better? We could fund 94 schools, there is somebody, the government can take up 3,000. So you scale out with regard to policy. The other thing that I think that's really crucial is scaling deep. Behavior change, communicating that, working with communities to understand how has that behavior changed, what have we done right to be able to see that change. We say we've seen 50% of an increase in income, but actually how did that happen? And why did that happen? And is it 50, is it 20? Does it need to have a percentage, or is it just behavior change to be witnessed by a qualitative indication of a tin roof, a motorcycle, a school, a bag, a new uniform which a child didn't have? So I think we need to be a little bit of we need to bring in certain set of introspection and therefore reflect on how we understanding that change. But again, I mean, I go back to saying it requires time. We need to be patient. And at the same time, we need to support organizations to be able to think about the change that they're driving, that simply expect them to drive it and write a report. So yeah, I would say it's a learning kind of journey. And we are hopeful to be able to support our partners and at the same time, learn with them in that. Learn with what we've done right and not.
Go ahead, Izzah.
I love the fact that you mentioned the term scale, right? Because even for MPI, it's not for scalability per se, it's adopting MPI, which would be different in terms if you adopt it or apply it in Sabah, right? Because Sabah would have its different measurement priorities. You apply it in Seberang Perai, Pulau Pinang, apply it in Johor. So of course Johor is facing this challenge vis-a-vis the competition from Singapore. So it's, when you talk about even scalability, I love that because sometimes you don't want to just think everything I have to adopt wholesale. That's not the way. So being very mindful and being very purposeful with even the CSOs that are within your midst, understanding their priorities, their strengths, and also celebrating that is also crucial. So this is why, you know, I felt when Mariana Mazzucato, she came last week, she had a session with the civil service, I think, and it's also giving them a sense, look, at the end of the day, everyone wants you to self-empower, right? And it does you good. Similarly to any organization, you're giving that encouragement because you want all our agencies, all our CSOs, all our schools and stakeholders to be resilient, not just for this year or for next year, but for the next 5, 10, 15 years. And I think this is why, you know, just not to easily be spellbound by the next kind of hype term.
Thank you so much. I really like this idea of sort of impact measurement as a journey rather than sort of like a checklist, right? And a whole of everybody, right? Kind of responsibility of thinking about how impact works and stuff like that. I will tell you, and we do, I think my colleague Reza is here from ASB, we do impact measurement even for companies, right? And for startups. And they have the same thing what Aditi said, is like, I'm busy raising funds, I have like 2 people, I have kids, like how do you expect me to put in these measures to actually measure impact? What are you talking about? I can't do this SROI, like I don't know, right? And the thing that breaks my heart is actually that a lot of these organizations actually create a lot of impact, right? You can see it, like with companies, you can see the products they produce, you can see how they help directly. And so my advice is always like, you should find a way to do it where it's just part of your business as usual, right? You collect information as you're going through, and you don't kind of target it to what the funder wants, you do it as part of what you think is important. And that way it's not so painful to measure, is sort of my guess. But it is difficult for everybody across the board. Now, I wanted to go back a little bit to Lina. So, Lina, there's quite a lot of questions here, and this may be the last targeted question I can take, about any success stories surrounding nutrition. There has been a lot of interest, I feel, around like food and nutrition and kids. So I'm getting quite a number of things here. And if you could speak a little bit to some of those programs, I think the audience would like to hear. Now, I think one thing that I wanted to point out is, to me personally, as a Malaysian, I think Indonesia is way better at measuring impact than we are, honestly, like leaps and bounds. I remember being very impressed over COVID. I attended a Zoom talk, of course, because I was stuck in my house, where the person who was speaking, I think it was one of the ministers was speaking and was articulating that we know in Indonesia for public school students that if they do not attend 1 year of school, that they lose 7 years in wages. And so and then I thought to myself, oh, I don't know what the number is in Malaysia. I couldn't tell you what that is, right? And so I'm very impressed with Indonesia's capability. So tell me a little bit more, nutrition. Big question, sorry.
Big question.
Yeah.
I don't think I know the answer. So I'm not have the specialty in the nutrition, but then I can share with you just recent study about the growth chart stunting prevention.
Yeah, perfect. We have a lot of stunting here too, so yeah.
So, so in Indonesia, stunting is still very big problem, especially for the eastern part of Indonesia. And then so we would like to. So there is the idea from the NGO say that, oh, maybe we should do a very low cost intervention, doing a growth chart. Growth chart means if you have a kids, then you measure the height and the weight of your kids, and then we say that, oh, maybe we just put the growth chart and then put it in the household. It's very simple. You print out growth chart, then you give it to the household.
So this is like a chart, where
it's
you...
It's a chart,
okay.
yes, with the height. But then there is some information that you put it in the chart. For example, nutrition food, and then what is the food that you should give to your kids. And then also very important is about early stimulation. Because based on the study, it's actually, so this is also the study coming from Indonesia, 80% of the stimulation come from actually the preschool thing. So then it's very important to actually having the stimulation, not only giving nutrition, but then the stimulation. And then so we did the study in the eastern part of Nusa Tenggara between 2022 until 2024. It's just recently finished. And then it's actually changed the behavior. So then the parents is actually, they know that the understanding to need to give the nutrition for the kids. But then they say that, when you are adults, then when you want to get energy, you eat more rice, right, for Indonesian. So then they're thinking more nutrition is actually, they say that, I need to give a nutrition food for my kids. But then they have the wrong perception. They give more rice to the kids. So we say that, the study is actually having more impactful, information is actually powerful, and the right information is even more impactful. So then that's one of the study that we mentioned. So then with the very simple low cost intervention, then you can actually change the behavior of the parents. But the other part component is very important, what kind of information that you provide to the parents. So
that's really interesting, and that's actually something to highlight as well to the hall, all the participants, is that a lot of the academic literature surrounding these kind of interventions has sort of moved away from the cash transfers, the products, to actually informational interventions, because one, it's cheap, and two, it's quite interesting, what information you give people. Their behavior actually really does change depending on basically what you provide. So thank you, Lina, for that. I think we have one more question, and then I'll just have a wrap up. So Izzah, tell me a little bit, and I've been getting a couple of questions on this. So how do we persuade politicians or governments to kind of buy into projects that maybe not so politically popular, but have very clear economic impacts?
It's quite a loaded question.
Yeah, it is. Sorry.
So I guess I can tackle what Lina mentioned earlier, because one of the key asks by some sectors is to ensure that we allow for nutritional food to be given to everyone in school, not just the poor students. Right? So now they have rancangan makanan tambahan, and this of course takes place across different governments in Malaysia, but the argument is because you want every child when they go to government school to feel that regardless who my parents are, I have equal opportunity, right? I'm being treated and I have this chance to make the best out of my studies, of life, and government school provides that ecosystem, that opportunity. So similarly, it was found that when you only give it to a certain group, some felt shy. Am I the poor kid that's deserving of this food? And not everyone takes it. So I think sometimes also figuring out, it's a bit more complex, but I feel you need to also showcase, yeah, you might spend more this amount, but actually what happens is you avoid that child from problems of stunting. And if you talk about early intervention with regards to future bullies, right? The earlier you intervene in school, lessons that affect not just boys, but also, not just girls, but also boys, you actually have a better outcome later in life. Whether it's the prison department in the UK, they actually intervene in juvenile delinquent centers because they knew you can kind of end the cycle of violence. So for me, it's really perhaps one way is to showcase the economic multiplier benefits down the line. And for sure, they will think about the next election. And this is a predicament afflicting many governments. And Indonesia is also facing certain challenges with the promises earlier made by the current president. But I think one of the ways is to really seize on this concept of universality, right? Because it's about, in a country as multiracial as Malaysia, you have to figure out more kind of programs and proposals that improve the level of unity. So it's as simple as it could be STR, but the point is, it sets you up for future readiness to embrace progressive taxation. That's not my words, that's EPF's words. Employees Provident Fund. So, but my point being, sometimes, you have to look at that. And I think the more governments are engaging with the whole spectrum of policy space. And of course, at the end of the day, is how you communicate it. Because if you communicate it in jargon-filled sentences, which I am also partly guilty of, you're not going to convince anybody. So I think simpler communication at every level, basically saying, this is what I'm going to do. I don't have all the answers, but I'm celebrating you. This is what you're going to get. And then this is what the outcome that's going to benefit everybody. So I think this whole linkage between effective communications, but also effective policy making that will definitely kind of produce impactful outcome. Easier said than done, but I see it. I see the fact that, especially when a lot of things that are being done in Selangor, for example, will be seen from the federal as something worth looking at, as well as Indonesia. If I'm not mistaken, the whole concept of Sejati Madani, Kampung Angkat, was really looking at what Jokowi did to empower the villages and the rural hinterland, and making sure that GLICs and GLCs are part and parcel of this process. But the next tough question, again, sorry to be the bearer of tough questions.
It's okay.
Just now, Lina mentioned when you give communities, it is less impactful versus giving individuals. Now that's the question we have to ask. There's still time for course correction, but to make sure that every money is spent with the best outcome in mind, that's the next step that we have to take.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Izzah. And I see this, there's this very angry sign that is flashing, time is up, time is up. So I'm assuming time is up. So thank you very much to our panelists. I hope they gave you a lot of things to think about. And over to you, Mr. MC.